On this episode of Around the Outside, Ian and Mike go into the full weekend review for the Monaco Grand Prix. Thank you to all our fans from around the world for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the show.
You're listening to Around the Outside, the American Formula One podcast with your hosts Ian Shea and Mike DuPont.
Shea
and Mike DuPont,
your hosts of Around the Outside, the American Formula One podcast. We have a great show for you today. We are reviewing the 2023 Monaco Grand Prix. But before we get into the Grand Prix weekend, Mike, what's going on, man?
Oh, not much, Ian. Not too much has changed since the past couple of days. How about you?
Not much has just changed at all, except for fun fact for our listeners, this is our second take. We were, 2 seconds in, and then the power cut out?
Yeah, about a minute and a half. We both lost power simultaneously. Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good omen for this episode, but you know what? We're going to give it a shot because Monaco is by far one of my favorite races on the entire schedule. You can't get anything like it anywhere else in, I want to say, even motorsport. I'm going to go that far.
Definitely extremely unique. Sometimes we get somewhat of a boring race, and sure, there wasn't exactly a battle for first place today. However, boring is the last word that I would use to describe this year's Monaco Grand Prix.
No, it was surprisingly not the most expensive parade that there's ever been. And I think that quali really set us up for what was in store for the weekend. Do you want to talk about quali? Do you want to talk about something before quali, or just get right into it, man?
I mean, the practice sessions giving us Ferrari fans some hope that there was a chance that we would be competitive. Charles put in his all in quali, but obviously when we got to the race, it was really just a 2-horse race, but really not really. I mean, Max ended up with a very comfortable win. But Sainz is looking good in practice until he, crashed.
He was looking super fast.
Yeah, he was looking really good.
Really impressed because he's got I would say a fairly strong pedigree on this track. Like, I don't like counting Sainz out when we go to Monaco. It was looking phenomenal. We had who fucking biffed it? Alex Albon. He biffed it into the wall after Sandoval.
Yeah, little too. I believe he lost the back end going into turn one. Both of which driver errors. We've seen many drivers have incidents at both turns, in turn one and the exit of the swimming pool. Carlos it wasn't just a brush. Like, he whacked the side of the barrier. And we've seen lighter impacts result in retirements and cars being heavily damaged, but it was quite the shunt. So not just a minor miscalculation, a pretty significant miscalculation. And I would imagine impacted his confidence level slightly for the remainder of the weekend.
I have to admit, I thought it was Logan when I saw Williams in the side because I couldn't see numbers. It would make
good
sense.
Bet. That's a good guess. I mean,
because Albon, he was cruising. He was putting in consistent laps the whole time. So it was weird and odd to see him. But he wasn't the only one to crash out like that. Lewis, of all people, going into Lowe's hairpin. Well, just before was that Portier. I don't have a. I love this. I love this track, but I always forget the names.
Yeah, I mean, Lewis looked like he was struggling for a lot of the practice sessions, but ended up putting in a decent qualifying. Out qualified his teammate and outplaced his teammate in the final results of the race as well. So I think altogether Lewis did a decent job at a track that has historically not been one of his strong suits.
No, and Mercedes with those upgrades, it's cool that they were here, but a shame that they were here because you can't, like we said in the prediction episode, I really don't think there's any validity to the performance. I mean, yes, it wasn't last year when they were like P out of the points almost, but they, I don't know, clearly they work, clearly they don't. That's why I'm excited to for Spain this coming weekend because that's the test track of test tracks. That's where you got
It
to go.
is. It is. Definitely, we'll find out a little bit more in Spain and talking about teams bringing big upgrades. McLaren expected to have essentially a brand new car by Silverstone. So hopefully that can add McLaren into the mix a little bit more than they are now. But they ended up with a very decent race result.
Yep.
Yuki and Lando were duking it out there for P9 P10 for a while there. I was getting excited with our predictions when when Lando passed him, but Piastri went ahead and I mean Yuki, it seemed like he had some kind of a brake problem. I'm surprised he even finished the race, but yeah, I mean the practice sessions were, besides the incidents, fairly straightforward. I would have to say qualifying was, as always, exciting in Monaco, but this one is right down to the wire, right to the end, Ian.
I've never seen a qualifying like this before. I cannot remember in any recent memory where it was that close, that exciting, and seeing 3 provisional pole trades with 2 minutes, less than a minute left. It was pretty fucking exciting. But before we get that, I want to just talk about real quick who went out in Q1, if you don't mind, good sir.
Checo crashed early, and it ruined his entire weekend. I plan on talking about Checo a little bit later, but yeah, I mean, with the track evolution around Monaco, there was no chance that he was going to retain any kind of position to keep him from being eliminated in Q1. And I mean, we have a whole lot to talk about with Red Bull and Checo later, but we had Checo P20, Zhou Guan Yu 19th. We have both Haas's.
Which was, sorry to cut you off there, but which was weird because you didn't hear anything about Joey this entire
weekend. Yeah.
For him, I'm confused, really. I mean, I know that Alpha isn't the fastest car on the grid and he's not a rookie anymore, so I was expecting more from him, but this performance P19 isn't what I want to see from Joe because I think he's got some real talent and this just was an off weekend, I hope, for him. All drivers have them, and if there were to be a track to have an off weekend, Monaco's the excuse. I mean, you're a top 20 driver in the world, but it's Monaco. Remember when what's his nuts? He was the Russian that drove for Haas. He couldn't mess with his steering wheel because he said
Nikita
it's Monaco.
Mazepin.
Thank you. Like, that's the type of intensity these guys are under. So it's kind of
maybe the most hated driver in Formula One history, Nikita Mazepin.
Mm-hmm.
But like the Williams, Alfa Romeo, they were one of the first cars out on the track. They knew that they were going to need something special to get them into Q2, and Valtteri was able to pull out a lap almost 0.5 faster than his teammate, and Valtteri's been good around here in the past, so not too surprising. But after Zhou in 19th, we had the 2 Haas's with Nico and Kevin, followed by Logie Sarge.
.059. He was that close to getting into Q2. So I would say a valiant effort from the rookie and the highlight of his weekend.
Definitely a race to forget.
Oh, poor guy, man. Poor guy. Q2, the surprising out for me, which I don't know if you saw because I didn't see it. Valtteri, Vabo was out. He was sitting in P15. I didn't catch any of him because he seemed to be like in P8, P7 around that 3 minute mark, and then obviously guys go faster. But I didn't think he was going to be P15. That was upsetting to see.
Well, he's only 2/1000 slower than Stroll.
Which he is. That I think is what set off his entire downfall. His had to have been his mental attitude.
I don't know. He's the most hot and cold driver in Formula One. He had incredible streaks of being terrible in qualifying, and the previous teams that he drove for, previous iterations of Aston Martin as well, and Lance just absolutely did not show up this weekend. Not even close to Fernando Alonso, and I get it. It's Fernando Alonso, but it's frankly just not even remotely close to being good enough. And there's such a significant gap between him and his teammate. Really awful. I don't know who had a worse weekend, him or Logan Sargent. I'd probably give it to Stroll, honestly.
Yeah, I would give it to Stroll too. We had Albon P13. I was hoping that he would be in the P11 mark, but De Vries, congratulations, P12. That's stunning. That's almost pole for that guy.
Yeah, the AlphaTauri had some pace this weekend.
He was able to not hit it into the wall, but Oscar. Mike, from the beginning, I was telling you, this guy's special. And
you definitely were. Yeah, that's definitely what's going to go down in the history books. That was your firm stance from the beginning, sure.
It's written in stone. 0.018 from getting into Q3. And I think that says something for him and for where McLaren's headed in the future for this season. They've clawed back a lot of performance in a short amount of time. That's the power of the McLaren Technology Center. That's why Sainz went there. That's why Danny Rick there. And that's why they have Oscar there. So they've got something behind the scenes at the MTC that we can only see in moments of brilliance, such as that qualifying from him.
0.015
seconds
off from his teammate. They're the closest. They are, or maybe one other driver pairing, are by far the closest, which is amazing for Oscar and his rookie year. Lando Norris, we all feel, is a top tier driver. He's shown his talent in the last couple of years, and Oscar's just continuing to impress and showing why McLaren made the decision they made.
But it was Q3 where the stories are really happening. Mike, that was phenomenal. It was incredible. And yes. I'm upset because Charles was nowhere near where I was thinking Charles was going to be throughout all of qualifying. What was going on in your mind watching him drive?
It was close. I mean, it was close. End of Q1, it didn't really, him and Alonso kind of felt like they had a safe lap and didn't really bother too much. And I mean, they were right. Q2, separating, 0.2 from Max. He was second at the end of Q2 on the results, and separating first and third. Max first, Fernando second, Charles third, was a little under a tenth. So it was anybody's game. Obviously, Charles has had a phenomenal record of late with qualifying. They kept mentioning how no drivers had 3 straight poles at Monaco since Ayrton Senna. That's quite the comparison. Definitely one that I think any driver would like to go for. It was very evident and obvious that the Red Bull and the Aston Martin were the 2 fastest cars this weekend, which is one of the
Yep.
reasons why Lance's performance is so bad and terrible and inexcusable, in my opinion. But for Charles to be that close consistently, it's, yeah, I mean, what's he going to do? He doesn't have one of the top 2 fastest cars. You can only do so much as a driver, and Carlos did all right in qualifying. So yeah, I mean, it sucks as a Ferrari fan. You want to see the Ferraris out there and up front, especially like they were the last couple of years in Monaco, but you can't really complain with the last couple of minutes of qualifying. Max Verstappen being over 2/10 down going into the final sector, pulls out a pole lap, pulls out over 2/10 in the final sector. It was absolutely stunning, a sight to behold. Super Max. It was really spectacular to see Max do that.
When I saw the delta that he had to Alonso, and I saw the 2/10,
I thought there's no way. There's no way.
No possible way.
There's absolutely no way. I mean, the speed he took going through the exit of the swimming pool section is what gave him the pole lap. Like, it was absolutely amazing, the pace that he took through there. And when he needs it, that Red Bull can give it to him. And that Red Bull, and we saw in the race, it's not. There was kind of a battle between Max and Fernando, but it wasn't really a battle at all at the same breath.
No.
Yeah, I mean, that Red Bull is just the fastest car. It's not even close. So kudos, Max. You may have the best machinery, but
that doesn't
put
count
in the
on
lap
this one.
when you needed it. Yeah,
that is pure driver talent to do what he did. As much as
in that last sector.
Yeah, it was incredible to see. I don't know how he did it. I want to talk about Esteban right quick with his provisional pole. Ooh, boy, do I love Alpine, and I have been talking on this podcast about liking Esteban, and it's at times quite difficult to be a fan of Mr. Esti Besti, as the internet and himself likes to call himself, because he can be disappointing in his performance, because he's the type of driver that can put a Alpine on provisional pole going up against the Aston and the Red Bull. I think this is a driver's track, and you don't really have, unless you're Max Verstappen, you can't make up time, which is why that Max Verstappen time makeup is phenomenal, because I don't know where the hell he did that. I'm still thinking about it. But as far as Ocon goes, it was clean and fast and focused. He's really finding, I hope, a continued groove with Alpine for this rest of the season. And this is coming off of comments. I'm not quite clear who said what, but top dog at Alpine was basically saying, to paraphrase, and listeners, please let us know where I'm going wrong on this, the Alpine should be farther ahead, and if they don't give performance, people are going to start leaving. I don't know if that came from Otmar or from someone even higher above Otmar. Did you hear anything about that this weekend?
Yeah, it's the like CEO of like Alpine. I was just like a scare tactic to try to extract more performance out of the team, but most of the community, the F1 community, that is, I think can agree that that's kind of a ridiculous statement to make. I know they had some pretty underwhelming performances at the very beginning of the year, but they literally just brought in a new principal. They say it takes years to really
Yeah.
turn a team around. And for me, that's unwarranted public criticism and adding extra stress to the team that's not necessary.
He went, maybe he took a cue from Dr. Helmet Marco and said,
Marco's
hey,
always
it's
been
been working.
critical about drivers
Oh,
before,
okay. Not the whole team. Not
not
the whole team.
literally the entire team.
Okay.
So I don't
Yeah.
know what you can possibly expect. It's not like they were winning, multiple Grand Prix last year and we're like a top flight team. Like I just think it's like a classic like scare tactic, but I think it's a bad move. Any sensible human being that's in charge of managing people and running a business would not go with that approach.
No, sir. And the Max quali lap and that whole action for the weekend wasn't the only thing that went down in Q3. Did you see what happened with Lando on his hot lap coming into the tunnel? Charles impeded his travel. Now, I hate to say it, but it wasn't, I don't hate to say it, excuse me. The engineer that is in charge of Charles needs to start communicating faster. I don't know if there was a GPS lag to give that man the benefit of the doubt, but Xavi should have told him a lot sooner.
I believe they lose some kind of signal or have some kind of interference when they go in the tunnel, but
Okay.
that wasn't the only time. I mean, there was an instance where Charles kind of impeded Carlos, and it's like, hey, come on, you're in the same freaking team. Like,
yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say, Ferrari, you can blame it on the strategy, but the biggest strategy blunder, and it ended up not really being a blunder at all. And the race was from Aston Martin with they're taking the Ferrari strat of the whole one tire or one lap pit stop approach. It was, I mean, it ended up not mattering. I mean, honestly, maybe it's a good call that they can gamble and retain the position. I can see how that could be a feasible way of looking at it, but even Fernando coming into the pits was like, "Are you guys sure? We're not. Are we sure we don't want to go out on the inters? Like it's raining all over the track." We even saw some runners out in the wets later on, which we'll talk about in just a few moments. But yeah, Q3 was a banger. We had back to back pole laps being set just in the last dying breaths of qualifying. So, and yeah, the race, the last 20-30 laps of the race definitely was a thriller as well, Ian.
It really was. If you've got nothing for the weekend build up quali, I would love to start getting into this race.
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right. Well, it starts, and I'm thinking that there is still hope for Alonso. I tweeted about it because historically speaking, Alonso is the best starter on the grid that I have ever seen in his 2000 in any car that he's in. I mean, what was it in Spain in the Ferrari when he was P8 and then somehow got to like P4 or 3 by the first turn? It was incredible. And he just has these consistent launches that makes you think, okay, yes, Max has track position, but he's got Alonso behind him. And I did have my fingers crossed, Mike, that Alonso was going to get past him going into Sandoval.
I completely agree with you, Ian. And just to add, the entire lap one, he historically has made crazy runs and overtakes to gain a multitude of positions. He is just a lap one hero when it comes to the starts and just throughout the entire lap one when everyone's still getting used to the tires. They were just sitting on the grid. Maybe the brakes are overheating. The car is at full fuel and it's heaviest at that point. Fernando is just, he has a knack of figuring out the feel of the car on that lap one better than maybe anybody who's ever driven a Formula One car.
I agree. I agree. I mean, I know we're not. I mean, I like Alonso a lot, and I'm not trying to be on this like renaissance of Alonso going on here, but yeah, that guy can fucking drive. And it was funny the parallels between the P1 and P2 and their teammates, because what was going on with Checo this weekend and Stroll. I think what we saw from Checo this weekend was reminiscent of Singapore 2018. He's an emotional guy. And when he crashed, Mike, I believe that it got into his head that he said to himself, I have not going to win this championship and I have to drive like a madman. And he took out the word drive and then just replaced madman.
Yeah, Checo made 4 pit stops. Oh, I'm sorry. Checo made 5 pit stops.
Oh.
So he wasn't the only driver to pit on lap 1. Zhou Guanyu and Nico Hulkenberg also made the same, and I think it's a sound strategy from the teams to, you have to use 2 tire compounds over the course of a race. If they believe the hard can make it to the end, then let's take a gamble, hop on the hards. Maybe from Red Bull's perspective, they're thinking that Checo can bridge the gap or be close enough to the rest of the field where when they make their pit stop, Checo will be able to undercut them. Very long-winded undercut for many drivers. But in hindsight, I don't really think that was the best strategy. I mean, when you start getting lapped in Monaco, your race is over. And that just sets you up with a further chance. It increases the likelihood that that outcome will become a reality. Behind slower cars, you can't overtake. It just means the faster cars are going to eventually catch you. And we did see eventually Checo get lapped. And in my opinion, Red Bull used him as a guinea pig towards the end of the race to serve the number 1 driver of Max. And that is going to be the biggest deflating piece of the entire weekend, in my opinion, for Checo, is that the team used him as a number 2 driver today.
I totally agree with you. When it started to rain at the end, they put him on full wets.
Yeah.
And he was collecting data.
Exactly. He was a guinea pig.
They
gave up on his race. They wanted to secure Max's race. And for me, that's going to be incredibly deflating for Checo.
Now, do you think, I mean, of course you want to make sure that, when you're in the back, there's no chance of coming back, and teams do this, but tinfoil hat time, do you think it was a way to kind of put a highlight, a marker, a thumbtack on this is Max's championship and you're now the number 2? Remember that.
I think Christian's just banking on that. Christian Horner, that is the team principal of Red Bull, is simply just banking before Monaco that the cards would fall as they will, and that Max will score more points consistently than Checo, and not to be a concern. What I will say, though, is this makes it a little bit easier for Christian now. We get another result like this. Max has a significant lead then. Making these decisions about strategy that favor Max, it's a lot easier to pull that trigger. It reminds me of maybe years where Bottas and Hamilton were going at it for a little bit during the beginning of the year. And then Bottas would have a bad race or two, and then the team has the ability to start to favor Lewis vocally over the radio. And what can you really say as Valtteri or Checo when you're in those positions when it's statistically very unlikely for you to win the championship? Now, it's a very long season. We still have many, many races to go, but it's only going to take one or two more of these for it to be a lot easier for Red Bull to make strategy decisions, Ian, without a doubt. And 25 points for Max, 0 for Checo. I mean, it's a
that
big
kills.
swing. Yeah.
That's huge. And the reliability of that Red Bull isn't something to bank on for Checo to
Of
make
all
up
the
points.
cars, let alone just the Red Bull. I mean, we didn't
Mhm.
see any mechanical DNFs today. I mean, it looked like Yuki had a problem with his brakes, like we talked about earlier, but he was able to finish the race. Yeah, it
I
was more or
loved
less driver error, cars just being so far behind as in Magnussen that they just called it.
I loved the way Yuki, when they were talking about what he needs to do for his brake balance and everything, and he kind of came on the radio, "You're trying to crush me." Like, as much as he's grown, he's still got that fire in him. I love a Yuki radio message.
He's
Yuki-san.
Firecracker.
And he was doing great. He was P9. He was holding
He
his
was
own.
killing it. Which is why he was probably gutted and like, instead of getting sad and disappointed, Yuki just gets angry.
I like that. He's a fighter. He's not going to take it laying down. And Lance Stroll, by the way, to go back to go backtrack for a second, dude, those do or die moves, which any reasonable human being realizes it's a die or die move. He tried to go on the outside of Lowe's hairpin on, I think it was Nico, and then he tried to go up the inside of, I think it was Magnussen or Nico, go on Anthony Nose. Like, everybody, you can't.
The hairpin overtake, there was literally no room to do that. Like, it wasn't even, like, he tried to put a car where there's only space for half a car. That, like, his lap 1 driving, his qualifying, his smashing the barrier again at the end of the hairpin, having the front one being stuck under his car, running into a barrier again. I mean, he, having to DNF because he smashed up the car so much. It was horrendous. Like, we talked about how earlier in the year Ocon had a terrible weekend because he got those like 3 flags. For me, this is way worse. Like, your teammate's comfortably in second, you're qualifying 14th, and you're smashing up not only your car, but other cars around you, taking awful lines, going for space. It's one thing if, like, you're not a racing driver, if you don't go for a gap that doesn't exist, the famous Ayrton Senna quote. There's literally no room. Like, it's not even like, the guy put his car there. It's like you're literally driving into a wall.
Yeah, exactly. And when it started raining, and I was thinking, okay, I give Lance Stroll full credit in the wet. He's a fantastic driver in the wet. But then when he was playing bumper cars, that they made the right decision to just get him out of the car. Like, you're done. We're done. I'm over this. And Lance has got to get his fucking act together. And this whole race was, I think, par for the course for Monaco up until it started to rain. And then that's where it got kind of confusing for me, because I'm going to backtrack and talk about Mr. Carlos Sainz for a moment.
1 second, Ian. I have a quick question for you before we get to Carlos. Can Stroll ever be bad enough that he can be replaced? Is that possible to be, if you're that far behind your teammate in Formula One? This is reminiscent recent history of Ricciardo and Norris with the consistent gap. They ended Ricciardo's contract early. They were so dissatisfied with the gap. When we've seen gaps that this significant in Formula One in the past, drivers are axed. Lance's dad owns the freaking team. Is there ever a point where Lance can drive so bad that he loses his seat, Ian? That's my question for you.
Yes, I think so. If he does like another one of these, but it seems like a sense of entitlement when you drive this poorly, but you know you've got a seat. And I think that Lawrence is going to have a stern talk with him and say, you aren't entitled to this seat anymore. Like when you were with Williams, yeah, you could pretty much do whatever you want because I was the biggest bankroll there. But
Well, then you're
now,
driving against Sergei Sorokin, so it wasn't really difficult to, outperform your teammate or drive on the same level. Like I get it, he's Fernando Alonso, but this is just it's
not
so
good.
bad that's why I ask the question. If he
Yeah, no,
continues to be this far off, is it actually possible that we could see Lance lose his seat?
yes. Yeah, you're going to have to. They're on their way to winning world championships. The writing's on the wall, and you can't have that amount of weakness in a driver. Simply put,
I
it's a
agree.
cutthroat.
If the team was worse, if they weren't, a top 3 team,
Yep.
I think that they would just keep it the way it is. That Lance would be able to drive in it however good or however bad, and it wouldn't really matter. But with their having a podium capable car and what's looking like maybe a top tier team, I think he comes under the radar way more. And I actually agree with you that there could maybe be a chance that Lawrence fires his son.
What do you think Christmas dinner would be like? Oh, that'd be so awkward. Are you coming over for Thanksgiving?
Daddy, will you buy me another team, please?
Carlos was on fire, quite literally, in the fucking cockpit today. I haven't heard him that queued up, teed up, whatever you want to call it, on the radio in quite some time. And then the rain hit, he spun out, and then his voice changed dramatically after that. But I heard that in a post-race interview, he was saying that they were a lap or two behind a pit stop before inters were even into play. I was wondering what he was talking about because the gap that he was behind Gasly, if I'm not mistaken, for a good amount of time. And I didn't see what he was seeing. I didn't think that what he was saying was quite justified. He just seemed to be an angry driver that had pace in a car which couldn't be shown because it's Monaco and it's, shout out Nico for or Kevin Magnussen for the overtake that he did to show that you can do it. But
right.
I didn't like his attitude today, Mike. I really like Carlos, but there was just something about him, that arrogance. It was arrogant.
He finally felt like he was going to score more points than Charles for better race position. He started on the grid 4th, Charles and Pierre started 6th and 7th.
6th and 7th. Okay, so I was wrong.
Yeah.
But
so,
I still maintain.
The Ferrari double stack was painful. That was probably extremely deflating to have to sit in the pits for 3-4 seconds waiting for Charles to get his tires and get back on the track. To feel like you were in a position, he was in a position at times to overtake Esteban. So to go off the way he did, it probably hurts a little bit, stings a little bit, and he was probably deflated. He thought he was in for a good finish, and that vanished as soon as the rain came.
What I liked most about Ferrari's performance today is that we got to see Ferrari favoritism come back into the sport with the end plate, because if that was a Haas, within a second, he would have gotten the flag to come into the pit and change the front wing, but he was able to do like a lap and a half before the thing came back.
Yeah, I don't know.
They didn't call him in.
Yeah, I think if the M plate stays on for one more lap, I think the FIA definitely calls him in, like without a doubt.
But it was like, I'm thinking about Canada, for example, last year with Kevin Magnussen. Same exact looking damage to the front wing, and it was 2 corners later they called him into the pits. It was almost instantaneous with Kevin Magnussen last year that he had to come into the pits. And then, when you're with a Ferrari, because Ferrari, you can't deny that this is a political sport and you don't
Yeah.
have Formula One without that team. Everybody's a Ferrari fan, even the FIA, apparently. It was just nice to see. It was good little old school Formula One coming into the new school. I loved
It
it.
was just a little, the side piece of the front wing. Everything else with the front wing was still intact, and it was just hanging on by a thread. And yeah, I think if that goes for much longer, then they definitely do something about it. They being the FIA, but thankfully for Ferrari, that little end plate flew off, and they were able to resume.
Can we talk about George Russell for a moment in time? What was he on about when it started to rain and he was behind Lewis? He was basically asking for Lewis to pull over so he could get by him in order to get fucking
ambitious as well, especially because there's still over a 3-second gap between him and Lewis. But he's the headspace for him to be able to think that ahead and basically say, I mean, he didn't need it. I mean, he pulled out plenty of a gap in front of Charles. I mean, even with the 5-second time penalty, I believe it was 5 seconds, right? Ian?
Oh yeah, it was when he
it
came
was 5
back.
seconds. Yeah, I mean, even with the 5-second penalty, he was a good 5 or 6 seconds still clear of Charles after the penalty was given. But I mean, George was basically saying, hey, as a team, we can theoretically maximize the points if we ensure that I keep my 5th. I will make sure that there isn't more of a 5-second gap, so Lewis will still overtake me in the final results and get the 4th place position. But if there seems to be a chance that I'm under threat by Charles, would it make sense to swap me and Lewis? Reminiscent of Charles at the end of last year saying, should we swap cars so I can get my 2nd place in the constructors? It's not really anything too significant to debate swapping places. And the fact is he was so far away from Lewis, and he eventually pulled the gap in a little bit, but he was so far away from Lewis, and he had like a 7-second and climbing gap on Charles that it was probably him just like thinking out loud, how can I secure this 5th place position? So I didn't hate it. It was just kudos to George for being able to have that capacity to think about things like that. Yeah, while driving around Monaco. Yeah, exactly.
In the wet.
Yeah.
That is a telltale mark of a world champion. We've said it before on this podcast. If you can have that presence of mind in that stressful of a situation, you're a champion. He's just waiting for, I don't know what, Red Bull dominance to end or his chance. But when he gets the chance, he's going to pounce. He's got to. I want to see him win world championship because I think it's well deserved, given his communications too. During the race, when he was talking about the rain, it was like he was going for a walk talking to his race engineer. Just, 6-3. And congratulations to Mercedes for building a sturdy vehicle, because Checo did not hit him lightly. That was a big impact. And to be able to maintain the speeds that they were doing with not even I didn't hear anything on the radio about him saying, hey, check the right rear, I've got a vibration. I didn't hear anything like that. Did you?
No, and I mean, yeah, the reason why George picked up his penalty to begin with, the unsafe reentry, getting essentially T-boned. We've seen a lot of cars this weekend and over the race make contact, hit barriers, and and stay intact. Ian, I wish we had a little bit more reliability issues with F1 cars. Honestly, it's yeah, it
They're
may
not.
add a little bit of excitement, some variables that the tire strategies really aren't giving us unless we have rain. But
Shout out McLaren, man.
yeah,
I'm really happy for McLaren. They did what, P9 and 10 today. I
yeah, they were
think
awesome.
I think that pairing, like you said earlier, is one of the best on the grid, man. I got nothing more to say about McLaren other than that. Like, they're doing it.
Yeah, are they one of the best? Uh, it's hard to say. We don't really have a lot of information on Oscar, but what we do know is they are very close, Lando and Oscar, to one another,
Mm-hmm.
and we all know, like we mentioned earlier, Lando is a great driver, and potentially championship winning driver if McLaren ever gets their act together, or if Lando says I'm sick of this and moves to another team when there's an opening. Uh, so yeah, I mean, is Lewis and George better? I think if you're a constructor, you would probably take Lewis and George
Yeah.
over
Oh yeah.
Lando and Oscar.
Yeah.
As a Ferrari fan, I don't know if I would honestly take. I mean, I think Charles is top 3 driver in Formula One. I just don't know about Carlos. So they're
Yeah.
definitely in the conversation for the best driver pairing on the grid. I think it's pretty easy to give them to say that they're potentially the closest two driver pairings on the grid.
I
But
mean, we could say Alonso Stroll. I mean, they were fucking neck and neck all week.
oh yeah,
They were
Stroll, phenomenal
right
job.
on there.
Oh yeah.
Vebo, P11, I believe he came in with Nick DeVries behind him in P12.
Yep.
Congratulations to the Alphas this weekend. I think Nick did what was needed and expected. So he's got a bit of a lifeline. He's maybe putting on a life jacket, so he's just not treading water alone anymore. And Valtteri Bottas, I really want to see him just become one with the car and a true leader for Alfa Romeo. I want to see him in the P10, P9 range more consistently. I want him to pull Zhou Guanyu with him because right now it seems like Joe is pushing save this weekend. It seems like Joe has been pushing Valtteri to be the team leader he needs to be. So this was, I think, more or all you could have asked for those two respective teams. What do you think, Mike?
It's hard to say if it's been Valtteri the first few races of the season underperforming or Joe just getting better and challenging Weber.
That's a
I mean,
good point.
the thing is, like, Bottas is pretty bad for a few of the races, like objectively, like compared to his contemporary driver teammate and the rest of the field, and they don't have a great car.
No, unfortunately. I
It's
love
very
that Alfa
obvious
Romeo.
and evident. It's a good looking car, but it's not, unfortunately for them, very fast. But P11 is a good position. He was going to be P12, but Yuki had his brake issues and sadly dropped out of the points after what was a phenomenal qualifying and race performance from Yuki Tsunoda. We do have to make sure we talk about the Fernando Alonso Aston Martin dry wet decision, the one lap pit stop. What were you thinking when he went on the hards?
What the fuck are you thinking? That was exactly in my mind. And then I came back and said, well, I'm not in Formula One. Maybe, as Martin Brundle was saying, it's just in, sector 2.5 and tiptoe through, you're good to go.
Right.
But then the rain, when it started happening in the pit lane, that's when they made the mistake. And believe me, correct me if I'm wrong, but did not Alonso say, "What are we doing? Why are we putting on slicks?"
He definitely questioned it. He ended up being almost 10 seconds clear of third. So he still comfortably came in second. But I honestly, in looking back, hindsight, I respect Aston Martin and I think higher of them as a team for making that decision,
Mm-hmm.
because it's gambles like that they're going to have to take to potentially beat Red Bull.
You
If
got
Max
to do
goes on
that.
the inters, Fernando stays on a dry tire compound, and it turns out that the track dries up instantly, Aston Martin makes all this time, potentially overtakes Max. I mean, Aston Martin are going to look like absolute geniuses. And there was
Mm-hmm.
no harm done, and it was worth the gamble, even if it made the last 10, 15 laps of the race kind of a foregone conclusion. But Max freaking still driving like a madman, scraping barriers, even though he's got a 20 plus second lead. I mean, it reminds me of Senna when he had, what was it, like a 40-second lead and crashed out.
Unnecessarily fast
Yeah.
on Mr. Senna's part.
Just
Didn't need
unnecessarily
to do
fast.
it.
But hey, Max, that's,
They're programmed that way.
theoretically, if he did the same thing, it's, again, decent company to be in.
Yeah.
But no, that would have been a massive headline if Max would have crashed out. And I think Brundle multiple times on the broadcast was saying, you don't need to do this. You have a significant gap. This is kind of foolish. But at the end of the day, Max takes the win. It was a mighty, mighty performance from Mr. Verstappen, and gets a nice hefty boost to his chances of winning the World Drivers title this year.
And Mr. Ocon, Esteban Ocon, I am just
tip of the hat, Mr. Ocon. Well done.
All weekend. He can
done.
do it. He can do it. I love the kid. I just, all in all, a wonderful weekend. And this is, even if it was sun shining, a parade, it's Monaco, man. Like, there's something, it's a track where I like to hold the argument that you don't need to do anything special because the venue is special enough.
Constructors standings. Drivers standings. Fernando Alonso in third with 93 points. Lance Stroll in eighth with 27.
Oh my!
Just throwing that out there. Separated by both of the Mercedes and both of the Ferraris.
Yikes.
Ouch.
This could be Lance Stroll's last season in Formula
Gotta
1.
be better than that.
He's got to get it together. And what is it? The Red Bull constructor lead, 279 to 120, something outrageous like that. It's their championship to lose. They need to DNF the next quarter of races.
Yeah, 249 to 120.
Yeah.
It's not even, it's not even close. And Max after Monaco, 144 points, Checo 105. It's going to take multiple DNFs.
And that's not going to happen.
Checo.
This is,
yeah.
Oh, but we're running out of time, Mr. Mike.
I think that's about it. Yeah. You got anything else? We're going to save the predictions for another podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We'll go over the points and our predictions for the upcoming Grand Prix, but we want to make sure these are nice, bite-sized, and easily digestible. Give you guys an extra pod throughout the week.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
thanks for listening.
We will be releasing those on Friday. So we want to give you guys a weekend warm up. And we also want you to keep track at home. Let us know how you're doing. We'll post our scores. How about this, Mike? I'll post on Instagram our final tally. And then you listeners at home can see how you're doing against us. I think that would be fun. The winner gets congratulations and a high five. And bragging rights for
Nice.
sure.
My eyes were glued on P10 for most of the
Yeah.
race.
Dude, that's what I'm looking at the entire
I'm
race.
literally just looking at P10. Like I feel like P10, that is the absolute gamble best prediction. And there was a time where I was like, oh, we're both going to get a point for Logie Sarge in 20th here.
P10, dude, that is like, that was your idea, and that is the most exciting part about the
That
entire
is such
race
a good,
for me.
yeah. I love that prediction. That the P10 one is like the best. Who cares about who wins the race? I don't care who's on pole. All I care about is who's P10 at the end of the day, baby.
Well, Mike, do you have anything for our listeners? Anything
That's
more,
it.
sir?
Thank
Well-
y'all for listening. My heart goes out to Ferrari fans. We'll get them some year.
But well, that's it for today's show, everybody. We hope you found it insightful and entertaining. For more F1 content, you can follow us on social media at ATO_USF1. Thank you all for being the best fans a Formula One podcast can have. We love Formula One and we love sharing it with you. Give yourselves a great week, and we'll talk to you later. Big
Forza
Mike.
Ferrari. Later.
Once again, thank you for listening to our race review of Monaco 2023. If you have the time, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or any other platform you listen on. You can also DM us on social media. We would love to hear your thoughts on the show and any suggestions you may have for future episodes. We are always looking to improve our show to provide you with the best Formula One content possible. Merci, Dankeschön, gracias, obrigado, cheers, and thank you for your continued support. Bye, y'all.